Well, near as I can tell, it is Monday. And just as that
Yeah,
means another edition of Sip of Java, it means I get to sit down and hang out with a friend for a bit. So, Billy, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it, my friend.
absolutely, and thanks for the invite. Yeah, it's we talked about this a few months ago, back when it was much warmer out, and I'm glad we're
Right?
finally getting to do it. Also, it's a spooky Monday, so
It is. Happy Halloween to you, sir.
yeah, thank you. Happy Halloween to all who celebrate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some people keep Halloween in their heart the whole year round, and
Exactly.
we appreciate that. We have no problem with that at all. Speaking of that, do you get a lot of trick or treaters in your neck of the woods?
Not so. My wife and I, we live in a condo building, so yeah, we don't get.
Okay,
Well, actually, let's see. Well, yeah, last year was still kind of mid-pandemic a bit, so there wasn't anything. I don't think there is because there's not really any kids in our building, so I don't
sure,
expect any. I haven't seen any times I've been in like an apartment building or anything like that.
gotcha.
So,
We usually get quite a few in our neighborhood. There's close-ish by. There's a bunch of townhomes, and so that usually draws a bunch of people in. I know one year I counted, and I think we had 150 kids or something like that.
mhm.
Somebody clearly like bust people in, like a car showed up with like 15 kids in it, and they all started getting around, going around the cul-de-sacs. But the last couple of years, well, this year in particular, Christine's like, no, shutting off the lights. We're going to the basement. We're just gonna eat some candy and watch movies. I'm like, all right, all right. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
nice.
not gonna argue with the boss. That's what she
Yeah.
says. So
Is
it
your neighborhood usually pretty good for giving out candy and all that stuff? Or,
seems
um,
that way.
yeah, I mean, I certainly
Yes.
remember back when, I guess we were probably about kids or roughly around the same
Right.
time of like that
Right.
during the 90s and stuff where, you would always try to find out which neighborhood in your area that kind of gave away the candy. And then
Right.
that's where, everyone goes. So,
Yeah, there is like that one neighborhood where people give out the big candy bars, and they've got all
mhm.
the decorations, and they go all out, and that becomes the one that they almost have to like gate it, right? Go, oh, hey,
Yeah,
sorry, if you're not from the neighborhood, we really
yeah,
would rather you
exactly.
not show up here. And we've definitely had parents, and then this is typically done with like a riding lawnmower. They'll have
hmm
like the little mini, hay ride kind of thing where they've got the trailer with a couple bales of hay and kids sitting on it, and they
Uh-huh.
drive them around, and it's like, all right, that's
Wow,
good.
man, some
Used to
people really get into it. Like I've never seen anything like in my area, or at least when I was a kid and you would do that stuff. That's awesome. Yeah,
well,
that's
so
probably
my
why you
my
get so many trick-or-treaters then.
I think so. I think so. So we have a friend of the show, Neil Ford. He and his wife
hmm
Candy are borderline pagans, and they are big fans of the Halloween.
Uh-huh.
They will decorate the living daylights out of their house, to the point
hmm
where I believe they have a storage unit for all of their
Oh wow.
Halloween accoutrement. And we're not just talking like, oh, they have a couple of things they hang. They've got like the giant Frankenstein and the whole
Uh-huh.
nine yards. They've traditionally had a Halloween party, and it is well worth attending. To say, although you do have to wear a costume.
Oh
That's
wow.
the one caveat, and you have to go in costume. And some people have been very dedicated to the cause. One year,
Yeah.
Stu Halloway actually shaved his head to match the male pattern baldness of, and I'm blanking on his name, but from oh god, now I can't even think of the show. The reboot of the Cylons. What the heck is that called? The
Oh, Battlestar
what?
Galactica?
Thank you. Battlestar Galactica is kind of the
Oh,
XO
like the
character.
yeah.
Yeah, he
That's funny.
shaved his head.
Wow. Okay. No, I would
Yeah.
not do that to this.
No, no, you probably got the best hair in the
Yeah.
biz, my friend.
Yeah.
I'm jealous. I've
Yeah.
got way more forehead now as I get older. So kudos to you for maintaining
Yeah.
the coif to do. I can't pull that off, but
Yeah,
such is
it
life.
is. I mean, you can't really see it too much in streams, but the grays are starting to come in for sure. And
Right?
yeah, and Bree loves to point out each and every single one of them, which is now getting too much. He just likes to point them out in
Well, of course
general.
they do.
So
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
if I had to choose, like I'll take going a bit gray, a little bit on the younger side, but
Uh-huh.
yeah,
No, it's always good if you can keep the hair as long as possible. I
yeah,
certainly had some classmates who seemingly in like elementary school were already starting to lose their hair, and that's where you
yeah,
just kind of go, well, I'm sorry.
yeah,
My
yeah.
son
I
does
do.
like to make fun of me, and I'm like, dude, you do realize this is probably going to happen to you, right?
Yeah, laugh while you can.
Exactly, exactly. Well, Billy, let's start where I normally start, which is origin story. How did you get into
Yeah.
this weird world of technology? How did you start playing around with computers? What did that look like for you?
Sure. So, kind of like probably many of us, I was a bit of a nerd growing up. So I played probably too many video games really back in high school, and actually that definitely got in the way of studying. So like by the time like I graduated from high school, like my GPA wasn't even 3.0, and it's one of those things
Hmm.
like looking back, like to even get like a 3.0, like all you had to do was like turn in homework and stuff like that,
Right.
but
Right.
clearly I failed to accomplish that, and again probably because gaming a bit too much. So actually, after high school, I didn't immediately go to college. I actually took off for about a year, and I worked at a package handler as a package handler for
Oh,
a small company called FedEx.
oh yeah, I've heard of them.
And
Yeah, they're gonna make it big
yeah,
someday.
yeah, yeah, they might make it. But yeah, that was incredibly mind-numbing work.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're just in a trailer all day, just box, loading that up. So like, there's
Hmm.
just no mental stimulation whatsoever.
Right.
And at some point, I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do a job like this for my entire life. So
Hmm.
I went back to going to school, I, I I wish I did a bit better, but I went to DeVry, which whatever. So, anyways, I went through, and it was actually one of the things where, not again, it's DeVry. It's not like I went to Stanford or something, but like I maintained a much higher GPA average, and again, that's mostly just because I actually focused on it
You
and
applied yourself. Yeah.
applied myself and actually turned in like all the homework and stuff like
Right.
that.
Right.
But yeah, so that was to get into programming and all that stuff. And then after that, like I got a job at like a really small company doing really exciting insurance regulation. So not just
Hmm. Hmm.
insurance, but
The
regulation
regulation.
of
Hmm.
insurance. So I worked there for about 7 years. I guess 8 years if you include the internship as well. Um, and at some point, I was just like, "Oh my God, I've been here for a quarter of my life." Like, and it was just, it's a pretty easy it was a medium-sized company, doing some
Sure.
like insurance regulation. Like, I like working there. I'm not, but it's also something that you're not going to be challenged too much or something. So
Sure.
it's just like I kind of needed to, move on, try to
Hmm.
expand my horizons. And so I briefly worked for one other company that I won't talk about, but I describe it as my worst professional experience of my career.
Yeah.
It just
Happens to all of us.
yeah, I was so on my LinkedIn, I was there for 6 months, but it was really closer to 3 months when you
Okay.
consider that I started, I think, on the last day of the month of, I think it was March, and my last actual day in the office, like it was like the first day or like middle of August, and so but my last
Uh-huh.
official day was like the first day, so like, and then I had like anyways, terrible experience. But I went to
Yep.
work then for a local consulting group
Hmm.
in Kansas City, and that was a lot of fun, and that gave me opportunities to kind of move around to different organizations, so you
Sure.
kind of get a bit of a broader perspective. And then I became more involved with a local user group at the time. It was the Spring Users Group, known by our mutual friend, or
Hmm.
ran by our mutual friend Rob Winch.
Oh yeah.
So I became more involved with that. I started doing like a couple of presentations there, and yeah, started kind of getting more into that, eventually did like a conference presentation at a local, sort of local conference called Nebraska Code. And I
Oh
was like,
yeah.
you know what, kind of like this stuff.
Hmm.
And eventually I got to know Pratik Patel, who helps run several conferences in the
Yep.
US area, including DevNexus,
Dev
which of course,
Nexus.
yes, a great conference. It's one of those, if you're a Java developer around the world, but certainly the US, like it's a conference you have to attend because it's cheap, and they bring in,
Hmm.
comparatively cheap, and they bring in a lot of great speakers like yourself,
Well, thank you.
and many other
And
great
you.
Java. Yeah, maybe, but yeah, yeah. So, but from that, I got to know Pratik. Pratik started
Yeah.
up a team at IBM, and
Oh, that's
when I
cool.
mentioned, I'm like, "Hey, I'm
Yeah.
interested in getting developer advocacy," and he's like, "Hey, I'm starting a team," so I joined them back in September of 2018.
Okay.
Unfortunately, things didn't work out because of the pandemic, and they ended up getting rid of our team. And so then I'm now at Oracle, which, in all all in all, it actually worked out perfectly. I love the team I'm on now, and it's great to actually just really focus on the
Sure.
JDK. So yeah,
Yeah, you've got a pretty good group there. There's no getting around
yeah,
that. So
yeah. No,
yeah,
I'm definitely happy to be here.
did, when you were younger, did you ever think that you would make your living at least in part by giving presentations? And I mean, I know personally growing up, anytime I had to do that in school,
Yeah,
terrified, just terrified,
yeah.
especially in elementary school, high school. I'm like, oh my God, I have to give a presentation. And now it's like, oh yeah, hey, guess what I do for a living?
No, I would never would have really thought about that. Like I did do like a couple of presentations, so I guess I was never particularly terrified of doing it. But
Hmm.
like I did actually have a bit of a speech impediment growing up. Like I would
Okay.
roll my R's and THs, like
Oh,
I would kind of mess up on that. And occasionally, like I mean, I went to speech therapy, so it's mostly gone. Every
yeah.
once in a while, I kind of goof on it, but no, but really more later on. I do remember though, this is maybe 2015, 2016. I was like talking with one of my colleagues from the consulting place I was working at here in Kansas City, and he was saying like, "Oh, you should do a presentation sometime or whatever." I'm like, "What do I have to talk about?" So as soon as like 2015, 2016, you know, like I had no interest or no thought of doing something like this, and well, obviously that turned around pretty quickly. Actually,
Hmm.
I think it was in part because of one of the mutual friends, Josh Long. I
Yeah.
kind of saw it's like, oh wow, you know what he's doing is so cool, getting to travel around all the world. And of course, also particularly at the time with Josh, like I remember someone else like asking him, this is kind of like, oh, which city do you like the most? He's like, I can tell, like they all look like the same Marriott hotel to me, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of the truth, but it's also
Hmm.
it is a fun job when we could do a
Right.
lot more travel.
Right.
It's exhausting at
Yes.
times, but you know, you
Yes.
do get to see some places, and if nothing else, just a bit of the variety of not just you know doing like the same work and going
Yeah.
to the same office and doing all that every day has some benefits as well.
Yeah. Can confirm that on more than one occasion, I've woken up in a Marriott and had that moment of, where am I
Yeah. Oh
exactly?
yeah.
And I very distinctly remember one morning waking up to catch an early flight and having this moment of panic of, oh my God, I can't get on this flight. I have a workshop, and then realizing the workshop was the week before. And yeah, that's
Oh
always fun.
man.
That's
Yeah,
always fun.
I do remember late in 2019, like I was just so exhausted from travel. So, because like a
Yeah.
couple things I would do was like I would set up kind of like long tours to kind of just so you're not like constantly going back and forth and
Yeah.
like having 1,000 flights and like you know to be a little bit climate conscious within the context that
Right.
our roles are remarkably not climate friendly.
Yeah. Our
But
carbon
so I would
footprint's larger than normal.
yes, very much so. But so I was like on like a 3 week stint in Europe.
Hmm.
And I just remember towards the end of that, I was just kind of like, if I have one more continental breakfast, like I am going to like explode because this is
Right.
like
Right.
I just could not just take, you know, more pastry or whatever.
Hmm.
Just it's just like
Hmm.
too much. And it was kind of fun. And then I remember a little bit later on, I think you know, I was like the last conference I was at was like mid-November, and I was just like talking
Hmm.
with like Pratik and then like another um, uh, developer advocate, and like everyone was just completely just drained by that point.
Yes.
And like I remember
Yeah.
being drained. I was just like, and so like this is late 2019.
Hmm.
And I was just like, okay, I'm going to travel a bit less next year. And monkey paw.
Mm, it's your fault. Thanks, Billy.
Exactly, exactly. I'm so sorry about that. But yeah, I did get my wish of a bit less travel,
Yes,
but
yes,
not
yes, we all did.
way less.
That was, we went too far. It's a pendulum. The pendulum just swings, right? But
Yeah.
well, to your point, I think a lot of folks look at their view on travel is it's like vacation travel, which is
Hmm.
fun. We're going somewhere
Yeah.
fun, and we're gonna, do vacationy things. We're gonna go to a museum. We're gonna play
Hmm.
golf. We're gonna sit on the beach, and then they think, oh my God, you guys are permanently on vacation. It's like, no. I mean, basically, the way this goes is we get on a flight, we go somewhere, we give a talk, we go back to a hotel, we get on another flight, rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
We're generally not seeing. I mean, maybe we get lucky and we have a
Hmm.
day or two here or there, or if we're someplace for a couple weeks, maybe we get to do a little bit of sightseeing. But in general, it's just a
Yeah.
grind of next meeting, next presentation, whatever it happens
Yeah.
to be. And I'm not complaining, mind you. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still a pretty awesome gig, but it's not the same as let's go to Europe and have a vacation.
Yeah. That's definitely true. That there's a lot of nice things, but yeah, it's so often that you're kind of exhausted, so you just go back to your hotel room, or you're
Right.
often just kind of there. One moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know. For some reason,
Rhythm.
my printer decides it wants to clean right now, so I don't know if
Of
you hear
course
that.
it
Oh,
does.
yeah. I don't know if you hear it over
PC
the.
load letter.
Yeah.
Barely.
Okay. All right. I'll just let it go then. Um, so yeah. It sounds great, and it again, I'm not complaining. It is
No
very nice,
complaints.
but like if you don't really know anyone else at the conference, or if you're just there for like a user group meeting or something,
Right.
it is sometimes very much like you go there, you present, and you just go immediately back to your hotel room. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know like exploring like a city, or like it's sometimes you can do that. Sometimes
Right.
just it sounds like, oh yeah, I'll just totally do that, but then like you're just kind of like walking around the city by yourself or something, and you don't always know where to go or what to do.
Right.
So it's just kind of
Right.
like, yeah, I'll just go back to my hotel
Yeah.
room.
It's not nearly as much fun when you're all by yourself. If you're there with your teammates. I mean, I've
Hmm.
certainly had some great experiences wandering around places with,
Oh
Paul and
yeah.
Bob and Josh
Hmm.
and Deshaun and Dan and everybody, Layla, Jakob, the whole team. But,
Yeah.
it is definitely different when you're on your own. You're in a city, maybe you're only there for 36 hours or something. And it's like, well,
Hmm.
yeah, I know I could or should go do this thing, but man, I
Yeah.
just want to go back to the hotel and chill. And
Yeah, and it's so often like what you're eat like you're just like having just like whatever the basic hotel food or
right.
something like that, or you're just sometimes like going to find just whatever comfort food you have. So it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, like you're in like a place that may have like a rich culinary tradition, but you're like, actually I'm just gonna have like the Caesar salad or
Right.
spaghetti
Right.
or a
I just
hamburger
did
or
something
something.
consistent. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
You must
no,
try our local delicacy. Oh, I really would like to, but you don't understand. This is day
yeah.
3 of 14 days. I need to get to the other side. But
Hmm.
so I don't know how to pronounce this. I love everyone's
Yeah.
handles. RGA Med version 2. So I guess it's the 2.0 release. What topics tracks do they usually have at DevNexus? So I Googled, and all I can do is show you what last year's was. I mean, you
Yes.
can certainly look at other editions. I'll throw that here into the comments. What it amounts to, though, is pretty much everything, right? There's core Java, Java platform, cloud,
Hmm.
JVM and frameworks, agile, architecture, practices, securities, tools, web and JavaScript.
Yeah.
I would say it's a pretty well-rounded software engineering experience.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's an emphasis on Java, JVM, etc. But I always found there's lots of fascinating things there. So
Yeah.
so RGA Med V2, I'd recommend. I don't know when the 2023 calendar will come out. I'm not sure exactly where they're at.
Yeah.
And I talked to Glenn a little bit. I have a little bit of insight that I can't share live, but I know they got some interesting stuff in the hopper, and
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll start seeing announcements here over the next couple months.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of those. As far as if you're a Java developer, like they're pretty much every slot, every session, every hour, there's going to be something they're going to be very interested in, um, because they just cover such a broad category of topics. So, yeah, it's definitely one of the top Java conferences in the world.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. And
Mhm.
Atlanta's a fun city to hang
Yeah.
out in, my experience. So I see one of your cats has decided to grace us with her
Yes,
presence.
that is Lulu back over there. She is meowing. She
Hello.
needs her attention right now, of
Uh-huh.
course.
Uh-huh.
But
That's how cats work. We were talking about that in the
exactly.
pre-show.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, my
Luckily,
cats are
yeah.
locked up today, so we're having electrical work done, so we had to put them away. Otherwise, I'm sure one or both of
Oh,
them would probably be like, "Wait, what did I hear about a cat? Where's their cat?" They'd be very
yeah.
interested. But
Yeah. Oh, yep. She
no,
is
okay.
fleeing
She's
at
bored of
me.
us now. We have not
Exactly.
given her sufficient attention. She's moving
I
on
know
to better
she's a
things.
cat, and she graced me with her presence, and I just did not appreciate it enough.
No, no, that's one of the things that Chewy, our big floofy kitty, what he'll do in the mornings in particular is he'll just kind of do these laps and
Hmm.
meow at us pathetically until one of us goes and sits on the couch, and then he'll sit next to you and go, belly up, and you have to rub his tummy. And then once he's gotten however much validation he needs, then he gets up and walks away. And that's it. That's his morning routine. He's got to have his
That's
morning,
funny.
attention. And when that doesn't happen, he starts jumping on things and, makes it
Yeah.
known that he's unhappy. But
Yeah, yeah. No, it
that's
is
his life.
funny how our cats, like, yeah, they can start to get very hangry in the morning
Mm,
or at any, meal times. Yeah,
right.
like, I don't know, for some reason. So my wife, she for lunch and she fed the cats, but like right now, Lulu is just back here in my office, just I don't know, going being
I would like
ridiculous.
would like more now, please. Yes, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I once somebody asked me as an icebreaker question, what animal would you be if you could be any animal in the world? And some people gave very interesting answers, like, oh, I'd be an eagle so I could fly, or I'd be a dragon so I could breathe fire, and I'd be a unicorn because they're mystical. And I'm like, I'd be a house cat. And they're like,
Yeah,
what? I'm like, house cat.
yeah,
Sleep 20 hours a day. You don't have any predators.
yeah.
Oh, I want some attention. I come get it. I'm done. I leave. I mean, it's not a bad gig.
Yeah,
Well kept house cat, I should say.
yeah, a house cat to like I like or like I've now see like all the cat memes and videos of like a house cat to like childless millennials, so
Right,
they just
right.
get the entirety of my wife's and I attention. So
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and they are very spoiled.
Yeah, yeah. Well, mine are too. There's no getting around that. But
Yeah,
so I know one of the things that you do with a regularity that impresses the heck out of me is your
yeah,
sip of Java on the Twitters. How
yes.
do you get inspiration to come up with that? And how has that experience been for you to put that together on a regular basis?
So yeah, it had, and thanks for mentioning and promoting it. It has been a great experience. So really, it kind of started back in April or May of last year. So not too long after I joined my current team. At the time, like in that month and a half, 2 months, like I only put out like a single blog article, and I'm like, man, I'm just not feeling like I'm producing enough.
Sure.
And then around the time, like I saw a couple of other people, like developers I follow, kind of put out just like a roughly 1 minute video on other various like programming topics. It was
Sure.
a little bit like lower, like what's a for loop versus a while loop or whatever. Um, I'm like, okay, that's actually kind of interesting. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll there's like one afternoon or one day I decided I'm like, I am just gonna put this together and post it out there because like I didn't want to say like, hey, I have an idea to do this to the team, and then sometimes like if you do that, then people may give their own ideas or spins or something, or sometimes you just by putting it out there instead of just doing it, you kind of delay that action, and
Right.
then something else comes up, and you just end up not doing it. So I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. I put together, and like once I put together the video, I at least shared it with my team before posting it
Mhm.
out there, just in case there was some red flag about not
Right.
doing
Right.
it.
Right. Right.
So I first did that, and they're like, oh, okay, whatever, and so I posted it out there. And then I decided to do another video. And then like after doing it a couple of times, I'm like, okay, I'm going to commit to doing it like every Monday. And yeah, it has been a fun, interesting experience. It's definitely one of the ones where like also, so like there's a couple of things where from previous experience where like sometimes like I put together an like idea, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do like all this content on whatever topic,
Yeah.
and I maybe do like the first article or two articles, and then I just ended up stopping just because it was taking
Sure.
too long. Maybe I let the scope to grow too big, whatever it is. I didn't actually really follow through, and then also maybe I put together these articles or whatever. Yeah, Lulu's
She's
back.
back.
Yep.
You'll have another chance.
Exactly. Um, and yeah, like I would spend like 40 hours or maybe even more on an article, and I post it out there and zero traction.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like you put all this time and effort, and sure, I learned something, but
Sure.
it doesn't feel very rewarding to put this huge amount of effort in, and then you don't really see anything. Like the amount of
Right.
time spent by other people looking at the content is less than what you actually spend on working on it, which is like,
Sure.
okay, that's not a good investment in return. So when I started doing this, like immediately, like like even like my worst performing in these videos, with the amount of time that, like you see in the views that people would spend watching it is more than what I put into it. So like that's very
Yeah.
rewarding. And it's certainly
Yeah.
a lot of people have always, without me asking, like brought up and, said like, oh, they enjoy it. So like that means a lot, not just, other people in our role, but like even just like other, just developers coming up and saying they enjoy it. So like that means a lot to me. So like it's actually very rewarding. As for the inspiration stuff of it, or for coming up with new videos, like it's sometimes a bit difficult. Like sometimes it requires like going through like, a lot of documents. It definitely
Sure.
gives me an opportunity to really learn and explore the JDK that I wanted
Hmm.
to have otherwise. So like the video I posted today was on JFR, specifically using it for automated testing. And like, that without having to constantly come up with new ideas, like that's something I would never really get into.
Sure.
And so it's definitely allowed me opportunities and ways to start learning about topics within the JDK that I wouldn't really maybe do otherwise. And it's allowed me kind of get some specializations in some areas that kind of help out my team.
Right.
So kind of like, yeah, like no one else on a team really knows JFR super well, just because,
Sure.
there's 1,000 things to learn and you can't learn it all. So like it helps there. And like other things like garbage collectors, I've gotten to become a lot familiar just because I wanted to produce content on them. So it's been really good in that way. And then of course that obviously gets developed into presentations and all that
Right.
stuff.
Right.
Um, so yeah, no, it's and then also yeah, also if you ever look up on the Java bug system, like you'll see I've submitted a lot of bugs because sometimes a good most of them are just really simple documentation things. Like one is just like
Right.
adding anchor tags to like the Java tool spec. So like that
Sure.
doesn't mean much, but like I've certainly ran into like bugs here and there. So like it's also
Hmm.
like sometimes I get pushing out into like these less used or less known areas, and then I kind of run into like some bugs or something. So that's also I think really interesting. Also makes it feel much more valuable because
Right.
submitting back bug reports, that's always helpful to improving a JDK.
Yeah, see, I've
Yeah.
always felt that part of our job, even though it's not in the job description, is chaos engineering
Yeah.
of the tutorials, the blogs, the posts, the documentation, any of that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And because I was talking with Glenn about this, Glenn Renfro, I was kind enough to lecture my grad students this weekend, and one of the things that we try to get across to my students was like anybody can contribute, and there's a lot of things you can do that may not seem like they're huge value add. It doesn't have to be, oh,
Hmm.
look, I coded up this super complicated thing or I solved this really hard bug. I mean, that's great if you can do it. But
Yeah.
the example we walked through is in some of Glenn's samples, there's a command that's not right anymore. It's changed. And
Yeah.
so we walked through me doing that and submitting the PR and Glenn approving it and going through the whole process. And it's small, it's a one-line change, but that will help somebody who looks
Yeah.
at that sample and they're not going to go, oh, hey, I got an error, what's going on? They're like, oh, it worked. Oh, okay, cool. And Glenn and really any of the main committers, they have high priority things that they need to work on.
Hmm.
Sometimes fixing that typo or updating that command, or oh yeah, we missed a step here, may not be at the top of their list.
Yeah.
It's a easy fix for someone, with my limited abilities to be able to go do,
Yeah.
and it adds value back to the community. And so that's one of those things that I'm going to try to help Glenn sort of evangelize this year and next year, I guess next year now,
Hmm.
since it's almost 23,
Hard to
to
believe.
talk about that, right? That, you can and should contribute. So
Yeah.
doing our part, one bit at a time. So
Yeah, and certainly contributing with the documentation is very helpful. Just because like sometimes it's hard to get to, and
mhm,
whatever, and like sometimes it's like not always like just like a time thing. It's just like about the mental capacity that like you spend a
right.
bunch of time really just digging through the code and whatever, and just even though it's simple, like you just like I just don't, you're just drained and you don't want to go through and just even a
Yeah.
simple like updating a typo or just redoing something a little bit is just like too much.
Well, and when you're the person who wrote it, you know what you were trying to say,
Yeah.
and so you don't notice that stuff as much.
Oh yeah, that
Whereas a
too, for
fresh set of
sure.
eyes comes in and goes, this paragraph is really unclear. Like, did you mean
Yeah.
this or this? And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, you meant that. Okay, cool. That's I didn't see that. So
Yeah.
apparently, Code with Sean has a new title, Captain Chaos. Is that tag taken? That might be a really good handle to get their hands on if someone hasn't
Yeah.
already. And oh, never heard of this documentation you speak of. That's fair. That's fair. I'm with you there, Sean. It is often ignored and
Yeah.
overlooked at our own peril, but good times, good times. Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed that because I think people sometimes think that a minute, well, that's not much work. How, it should
Yeah,
only take you a couple minutes to put together. My experience has always been the shorter the time chunk, the more effort I have to put into hitting it because trying to keep it in that nice compact little space is hard. And I
yeah,
mean, I think you're hitting the right mark in my opinion because
yeah.
our attention spans are not as long as they used to be. Ooh, squirrel. So I, I think it makes it a little more easier to consume, right? It's like a little potato chip kind of thing as opposed to
Yeah,
oh wait, how long is this clip? But I think there's a lot more work that goes into that than people may appreciate, to hit
for
that
sure.
minute-ish mark.
Yeah, so and that's actually one of the things I kind of recently relaxed. So for a long time, like I was absolutely determined that it should be under a minute. Like no
Okay.
longer like I had like a specific like it goes like 59 minutes and then 28 frames. So like so like I guess almost like just specifically a little bit under a second or under 60 seconds.
Sure.
And so in part that was because it would then be considered like a YouTube short.
Okay.
So like sometimes we would post them to YouTube, but then like one thing I would notice is like there would be people complaining on the YouTube saying like it's really hard to follow because like the controls for YouTube shorts are terrible. Like you can't like hop back 10
Mhm.
seconds. Like you have to watch the entire thing
Sure. Yeah,
again
yeah.
to get to some point. So I kind of heard that. And then also it would be very, kind of what you said to you, what you kind of are going to, that it'd be very difficult to sometimes get things under a minute. Like I'll have to leave
Mhm.
something out or really kind of like any like, pause in the audio. Like I would just have to remove it. So like, it's like only like two
Right.
frames of like pause. And so like sometimes it would make it feel very rushed and stuff. And then sometimes,
Sure,
maybe you
sure.
leave out some important context. So I relax it a bit. Like I'll still for sure try to keep it under 2 minutes because if you start
Right.
getting it to be too much, then it expands the scope, and then it becomes difficult to maybe keep that weekly cadence, which I kind of fallen off a little bit on, just
It's
because,
hard, man. It's hard.
yeah, it's because it's a mixture of travel.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, really, it's a good amount of travel, and then a couple of times I ran into some issues, um, like a couple, like the episode before the last one, I was doing some testing on it,
Mhm.
and then I wasn't getting the results I expected. And anyways, long story short, like I just delayed it rather than potentially release something that could be misleading or wrong or whatever. So yeah, it's very difficult. And then also sometimes it's kind of like once you get past like, like my first episode was describing the new switch expression or the new switch syntax. Like, like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a very easy, low hanging fruit. And, like by now, like all the low hanging fruit is gone. Like I eagerly anticipate every time when like a new version of the
Sure.
JDK was released, which is luckily every 6 months, but also with a weekly
Right.
cadence, that's still
Right.
like 20 some odd episodes between them.
Mhm.
Because like I'm like, okay, some fresh new content is like some easy low hanging fruit for at least a little bit. But
Right.
yeah, it gets picked thin pretty quick, and then I'm like having to go like really deep into like certain things, and so like that can make it more difficult. Makes it a bit more research for sure.
Right. Right.
But yeah, but like at least part of what I did is I do try to really time box it. Like, I try to keep it
Mhm.
under still, I gave it a 1 minute, but I keep it to about 2 minutes. Now, I'll keep it under 2 minutes and really try to maybe about a minute and a half. So
Sure.
that prevents the scope from expanding too much. To at least make that, weekly cadence somewhat possible.
Right.
And then like I also release like a companion article with it, which I also try to keep under 500 words, which kind of also makes sense within like it being a minute long video.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's definitely one of the things I did was like I made to sort of scope it in such a way that, it's a still practical thing to hit. Because otherwise, yeah, if you just let scope kind of expand too much or just make it too free form, then,
Right.
again, that was just based on my own previous experience working with myself, knowing myself,
Right.
like then you start to fall off to where you can, it's like, oh, okay, you once a month and then once every other month, and then it's just never happening again. Um, Yeah.
Well, constraints shall set you free, and just for those who aren't aware, it's
Mhm.
inside.java that you're talking about there when it comes to your
The
6 of
articles. Yeah.
Java. Yep.
Hmm.
So for folks to be aware that there is the
Yeah.
pros companion that goes along with that as well, which
Yeah.
I've always found to be really useful too, because there's some people learn more
Hmm.
verbally, some people are more prefer reading, some people are visual, and so trying to give folks multiple modalities to consume the
Yeah.
information to me has always been, part of what we're striving for,
Yeah.
as much as possible. So
Yeah, absolutely. And like some of the stuff also, like particularly this most recent video, it could really help from being able to like step through like each individual code element and
right.
then also providing like a little more context, which I just can't practically get into within like the time limits of my video. Like there's like one specific thing where how I'm doing something within the code looks a little bit weird and a little bit unnecessary that I can kind of
Hmm.
explain in the article. Like, okay, the reason I'm doing it is because of this kind of reason, which is non obvious, but I just didn't really want to get into within the within the
Right.
video.
Right.
So, and then also I can provide like some links to other stuff as well, which again,
Yep.
reading
Really
out a
hard to do a link in a
URL,
video.
yeah, you're not gonna do that. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Well,
yep.
speaking of titles, Fuel Snable says their title is Misc Dev, and I'm with Sean. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Although, in
Yeah,
fairness, a lot of our titles don't make a whole lot of sense in this industry. I think I'm
no,
like staff technologist two or something. I have no idea, or I don't know.
yeah.
I don't get what any of that stuff means, but it's
Yeah,
fine.
sometimes I
It's
always
fine.
find like there's like I'm a developer relations engineer versus a developer advocate engineer. I'm like I don't know if there's a difference between. I mean,
Right.
sometimes like I feel like
Right.
so many titles like there's not like what's the difference between a software developer and a software engineer? Like oh
I don't know.
yeah there's a lot of I mean certainly there is some like hopefully an architect at an organization does have like a different role and responsibilities from a software
Hope
engineer.
so.
Yeah, hopefully, but yeah, it's too often I think there's just like the same title for or different titles for the same work or functionally
Hmm.
the same work. Um, or sometimes it's a completely misplaced title that is just completely wrong. Like you're
What
like
do
a
you mean by
scrum
that?
master, or like, or
Hmm.
somebody's like, yeah, I'm a scrum master, and then like they're doing like waterfall
Yeah.
development, or
Yeah.
I have no idea. So it's just like, yeah, then that's really bad.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. For a while, my organization, previous company, and I think it was just a role. I don't think it was an official HR title, but it
Mhm.
was like solutions engineer or something.
Yeah.
And when we were kind of like an internal consulting company that we would
Hmm.
help other parts of the company, or they'd give us work and we'd do it and hand it back to them. It just sort of depended on the relationship they wanted. And when we would start up a new project, that was part of the process was, and here's
Yeah.
the role you'll be playing, and you will be the solutions engineer on this project. And one of my managers told me at one point that, well, we wanted a title that essentially meant architect, but we weren't able to use the word architect because the architecture group is the only group that could use the word architect. Like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool. So Misc Dev is doing important
Ah.
things others think are boring. All right, I'll buy that. I mean, to be fair, there's a shocking amount of that in software, right? There's all these things that
Yeah.
have to be done, and they aren't always the most exciting work. As
Yeah.
I keep quoting Neil here today, but as Neil told me once, he said, "Meta work's more interesting than work." So
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody's got to do the work, and I guess it's Fuel Snable. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah, no, that definitely good to have someone who's willing to, do some of that documentation, some of that edge testing, or also some of that, things like builds and stuff like that, like automating them, or like some of that stuff, like I know I should do this, or you should do this, but then like you can never find the time. Again, I think
Right.
a lot of it is also not just time, but just like the mental, like you're just drained from like whatever your
Hmm.
primary focus is, like you're just kind
Hmm.
of drained from that, and you just don't have any additional mental effort
Hmm.
to devote to like some of these the important mistasks that luckily
Yeah.
Fuel Snobble
Yeah.
is out there helping
Yeah.
us with.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
So Java 1 wrapped up recently. How you
Yes.
feeling? You recovered? Did you get some sleep, I hope, last week to get yourself
Yeah.
back on a normal schedule there?
Yeah, mostly recovered. Yeah, yep. Java 1 was the week before last, and a lot of stress, a lot of worry about heading into it. But actually, I think it went really well. For
Awesome.
kind of the first one coming back. I think one of the things that's really nice was actually how the venue was set up. So, like
Okay.
every other venue or every other conference I went into, like you would have like the main venue hall,
Hmm.
and then like all the other the presentation rooms were like just somewhere scattered throughout the building. So like to get
Right.
to exhibition hall, like you would have to like deliberately want to go there. One of the really cool things about the venue we were at is that all the presentation halls were all around the edges of the exhibition hall, and so like you would have to be in the exhibition hall to go between each of the presentations, and so
Oh,
you would go
nice.
back into it. So
Nice.
yeah, hopefully, I think kind of sort of plan maybe is to maybe do it there again next year.
Sure.
Nothing's finalized, but hopefully it is because it's definitely one of those that if Jawan was kind of fully, with like the attendance of like, 1,500, 2,000 people, like the exhibit hall would have been really like a hopping place. And as it was
Sure.
actually still like a really great opportunity to talk with people, learn, and that great hallway track that
Yeah.
really is like the key benefit that comes from many conferences. And
Agreed.
also for me, it was like the first time it was a real opportunity to meet a lot of the JDK engineers in person.
Sure.
Um, obviously I started during kind of like the middle, sort of kind of beginning of the end of the pandemic. I don't know
Hmm.
kind of how we describe last late winter, early
Right.
spring. But yeah, so that's when I started. So obviously, I knew many of the people on my team. Like I luckily met most of them in person like once or twice.
Sure.
But a lot of the actual JDK engineers, like I never really did get a chance to meet in person, or at most just a brief in passing.
Right.
So it was actually really nice to sit down, have conversations with them, to get to know them a bit better, and not just a
Sure.
Slack ID or or just only through like a Zoom meeting. There's always
Right.
that difference between actually talking to someone face to face.
Well, that hallway track, this is something Glenn and I've talked about. This is something Billy, not
Mhm.
you, Bill, different Billy, back to back Billies. I don't know how that happened,
Oh
Billy.
wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's all Billies all the time.
All
It
the
is that
time.
hallway
We're
track, as
taking
Glenn
over.
calls it. Exactly. It's
Mhm.
called that secret track of the person you
Mhm.
bump into it. And that was the thing I missed most during the
Yeah.
pandemic was not having that random interaction with you or frankly all the people that have been on the show and
Mhm.
just having an opportunity to go get a cup of coffee or just catch up or just have a random one-off conversation about cats or
Yeah.
Twitter or whatever. To me,
Yeah.
that's the real value there is that human connection and making
Mhm.
that bond. And it's so much easier than when you go back to the Slack conversation or the Zoom conversation because you've got some of that grounded context and it
Yeah.
it helps sort of personalize that individual and we become more three-dimensional, which I think is very important. But
Yeah. Yeah, and also just like, when you talk to someone in person, like you know, uh, these streams, you can kind of bring up like this random topics, but like you wouldn't really do that, in a Zoom meeting. You wouldn't just be like
right,
sitting there just gabbing with someone on various topics. People
we
be
have
like,
an agenda.
yeah, we have an agenda or whatever. So like, yeah, you wouldn't, if I wanted to talk to someone about, Loom, or like I wouldn't just like bring up like random other conversations about, whatever with them
Mhm.
typically. So you get to humanize a person, you get to see, learn a bit more about a person beyond just whatever specific
Right.
technical topic that they might be discussing. So that's always an important thing. It's like, okay, this is like
Totally.
I said, it's a real 3D person,
Mhm.
and not just um, in that you've seen in 3 dimensions, but also that they have a personality beyond whatever,
Right.
their job
Right.
is.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So speaking of JDK, speaking of Java, is there anything coming out or that has come out recently that you're particularly excited about or that you wish developers knew more about or pay more attention to or
Yes, so actually, there's a couple of things I would like to talk about. The first is ZDC. If you're not familiar, ZDC is and Z doesn't stand for anything. It's just, or actually, I think it's a reference to the ZVS file system. But all the
okay.
same, it is a new garbage collector that it was experimental in JDK 11, and I think it went production in JDK 15. But if you're on like JDK 17, that's probably where most people would be actually interacting with it. Um, And so anyways, it's like an ultra low latency garbage collector, and then they just recently, so its current release form, it's only single generation, which if you're in garbage collectors, you'll understand what that means. But if you don't worry about it. But if you're interested in it, they also have released an early access build for their generational version of it. So we're looking for feedback on that. So if you're interested in your organization, like if that, or you're already using GDC or you're looking at maybe using GDC, shoot me a DM on Twitter and I'll be happy we can get you involved in getting feedback for that. Because like the GDC team is desperately looking for feedback because, they test it, they run it through, various performance testing, but it's nothing like, real
Right.
workloads and stuff like that, or just there's nothing you can get comparatively from actually working with a bunch of different developers working with real workloads or their own test cases and stuff like that to find those edge cases or finding
Right.
usability cases and stuff like that. So definitely looking for a lot of feedback there as well. Um, and then the other thing is JFR, so JDK Flight Recorder. And this is more probably for kind of library developers, kind of like a lot of people, the Spring team. The JFR team is kind of looking for more libraries, maybe see about integrating it because it can provide a richer detail for developers when they're using JDK Flight Recorder to get information back. That it's not just, hey, here's what's happening within the JVM and the JDK itself, but then also kind of getting up higher through that stack, including that library layer, saying like, hey, here's what's happening in this call to Spring when it's like calling down to the database or making a call to some other external service or whatever, there or when we're doing like bean creation and stuff like that. Maybe adding events in those areas could be very helpful. So yeah, that's another thing. So if you're a library developer, and I've been kind of reaching out a couple already, but if you're kind of maintaining a framework and you're interested in that, again, hit me up. I'll be happy to kind of talk with about what, that's going on or connect you with that team to maybe help you out with that.
Yeah, I might know some
So
people that are in that space.
a
So
few.
Fuel says they're in 5D, so I mean that makes sense. That makes perfect
Uh,
sense. And then I was curious if Loom has shipped at this point.
so it has shift within the sense that it is now part of the main line of the JDK builds, and that happened with JDK 19. Two features of Loom shipped. The first was virtual threads as a preview feature, and so virtual and then structured concurrency as an incubator feature. So first, virtual threads. What that is that it allows a thread to be just contained within. So threads within Java are pretty heavyweight. A thread lines
Yeah.
up very basically one to one with an operating system thread. And there's a lot of overhead involved. There's a lot of overhead and context switching between them. So there's a limited supply of them of in the thousands or so typically. So you couldn't have too many of them. And certainly when running like application servers or just highly concurrent applications, there was a lot of issues when it comes to horizontal scalability. Virtual threads, what they allow is they are in memory, and when a thread is not being in use, it can kind of be parked, and then like when it's being blocked, like it's making a call to a database, it's making a call to some other external service or something like that. While it's waiting for that response, like it can be parked until it's actually coming back and that response is available, and then a thread will pick up and then actually still continue processing it. So it gives you a lot of that horizontal scalability, but then it follows that familiar blocking IO design and imperative design that we're all familiar with. So that's
Mhm.
what's really nice. And structured concurrency, what it allows is like, okay, let's say you are making like you have a unit of work and you're going to make a bunch of different calls to like five different services and they can all happen in parallel. Like right now, like how you would typically design that is you would have like, call one, call two, call three, call four, call five, all done linearly. Um, and so obviously that means however long it takes to all that work to happen is how long it would take to run. But now structured concurrency allows for an easy way to have like all five calls to happen at least somewhat simultaneously, or they could happen simultaneously as the system would allow based upon the number of threads available. And then also allow some things like, okay, if any one of the calls fail, then just cancel everything else. Or if one of the calls succeeds, then cancel. Or, there's a lot of flexibility in how that's handled. So that helps a lot. So that's an incubator feature. So like that means the API could change a little bit more, and
Sure.
it's probably going to be a little bit longer before it becomes a normal production feature or a standard feature. Virtual threads are a preview feature. The API should be pretty solid. Their actual second preview on the job I just saw for that, the JDK enhancement proposal, there was no meaningful API changes. So hopefully that should be solid and part of JDK 21. So it
Nice.
looks like Feel Snobble has been asking a bunch
Yeah.
of questions.
So I had a previous service that would benefit from virtual threads.
Hmm.
Had to run on a big cluster because of lots and
Yeah.
lots of threads. A half joke that we could save a lot of money by rewriting it in Node.js.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, it believes Loom would definitely have helped save some money there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know Brian just wrote a piece on virtual threads that's sitting in
Hmm.
my tabs here. And I always used to joke that if you got to do concurrency in Java, step one is get Brian on your team. And unfortunately, he doesn't scale, right? We can't
Yeah.
just get more of
One of
them.
the funniest tweets I remember seeing from Brian was, like so many of us, like he's just constantly getting peppered with like recruiter emails, but like he just kind of tweeted, it's like, yes, I know my job says Java language architect, but I'm not or I know there's architect in my title, but I'm
Mhm.
probably not the architect you're looking for like your organization. Like
Right,
he's like a
right.
few levels above like your mid-level
Hmm.
organization that's
Hmm.
looking for an architect.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
exactly.
bit of a bazooka going after a
Uh-huh.
lie.
Exactly. I don't know if you know the answer to that off the top of your head, but does virtual thread impact the IO APIs?
Um, yes, yeah. So ultimately, that comes down to those IO APIs actually then implementing that behavior. So like the rather than a JDK or any other sort of library that's doing some sort of IO. So like I mean that can also be with like a JDBC driver or whatever, they would actually have to take the time to actually implement it to where it's like, okay, instead of using like a normal platform thread, that it's actually going to use a virtual thread, and then that when it makes a call, whether or not it's gonna when it's not being blocked, then it's going to get picked up later on. So yes, it can, but it has to actually be implemented and updated to properly take advantage of it. Now, if they don't want to take advantage of Loom, it's not going to negatively impact them.
Oh, funny. So Fuel goes on to say the only thing worse than
True.
getting irrelevant job offers is getting no job offers, and
Yeah.
seems to appreciate the answer. So there we go. And we did have one other comment. So RGA Med said they had challenges getting their virtual ticket
Yeah.
lined up. Took a while. Yeah, I apologize. I will assure you that having worked, we both work at fairly large companies.
Yeah.
Sometimes the processes behind that are out of our control. Would be the polite way to put it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, yeah, that's something that is a bit out of control. Certainly, we um, realize that some of those are kind of difficult issues, and hopefully we'll be able to have a little bit more control for upcoming Java ones. Again, can't not I can make any promises, just hopes that can improve that. But yeah, certainly we are aware, and we can maybe improve upon that for next year. That's also just a little bit of the reviving the Java one brand that kind of went
yeah.
away after a couple of years where we got was Oracle Code One, and then of course the
Hmm.
pandemic came along
Hmm.
and prevented that as well. So it's
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Things will improve.
yeah.
Will there be Java NNIO like new IO to support virtual threads?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that package, so I'm just not going to give any answer because I have no idea.
Ask Brian. We'll put Brian on the spot for that one. It'll be fine. I got
Yeah,
to get him on the show one of these weekends. I've reached out to him a couple times, and I just need to actually try to schedule that one because I think
yeah.
he and I would have an awfully good time chatting about various things. Although honestly, the most fun would be the pre and post show. But
Yeah, I don't. I'm sure exactly. Like that's really taking notes. Like, oh, this is so much more interesting for later on.
well, it's funny because I mean I think most people realize there's that whoever happens to be on, we always try to get online a little early just to do
Yeah,
tech check and everything else, and kind of and I always like the pre and post show is kind of for us, and then it gives us
Hmm.
an opportunity to talk about things that we might not talk about live in a
Yeah.
recorded kind of environment. I know Venkat was kind enough to lecture to my students a couple weeks ago, and he's like, "Well, I'm not going to talk about that because I'm being recorded, so let me just leave that be." And it's like, yeah, there's things that we will not say when we know when there's no plausible deniability involved. But
So
yeah,
one of this on the being recorded is like we were joking, like also like at Java One or whatever, like we need to get like a shirt that says like this meeting is being recorded. Like particularly for
yes,
also like when
yes,
in person we were saying some stuff, it's just like
mhm,
this meeting is being recorded. It's like,
right.
oh, and now all of a sudden you're gonna very much modulate the talk.
I found the same thing happens when you're presenting in your hometown. So I know
Hmm.
we were hanging out at KCDC, and
Hmm.
that's where you're based.
Yep.
And anytime I do a presentation in the Twin Cities, I always have to think in the back of my head, is the person I'm alluding to in the
Oh
room?
yeah.
And or could someone make the connection to what company I'm talking about, or what incident I'm talking about, or who I'm talking about? and,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's amazing how little information some people need to make that jump. I was
Oh
chatting with
yeah.
a friend of mine, and I was telling I thought I had gotten rid of all identifying information. I told the story, and he looked at me and said, "Are his initials?" And I went, "Uh-huh." And I'm like, "Oh man, all right, well, I guess that person's reputation goes a long way."
Yeah.
Yeah, waves hand. This is not the answer you think it is.
Yeah.
Agreed, Sean. Agreed. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's half the value of. Oh no, no, that's not at all the organization I was talking about. Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, overall, like globally, like, the tech community is a lot smarter than you think it is. And then within your
And
own like
smaller.
city, and much, much smaller once you get down to the individual city level to where, yeah, quickly, if you just say like a few things, it's like, oh, you're
Mhm,
talking about this person. Because like there's
mhm,
also a few people
mhm.
who I have worked with professionally at home, like I would not want to work with professionally again. And then it's
Right,
just like, and
right.
then you kind of like talk about, and it's just like, oh my God, like this person has been going around like all throughout this city, like doing this stuff. So yeah.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate having you on the show
Yeah.
again
Thanks,
today.
Sean.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well,
So
so it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember, this is a long time ago. A friend of mine was at an organization that got acquired, and one of his colleagues basically went into one of the first meetings and said, "Okay, here's a list of people that if you hire them, or like if you don't retain them, I'm going to quit.
yeah.
Here's a list of people that if you do retain them, I'm going to quit. And then here's people who are like, yeah, no, I'm fine either way." Right.
Yeah.
And it is, yeah, that's a good point, Fuel. So there's coworkers and contra workers, and yeah, there's definitely some truth to that. But
Yeah, no, I remember working with this one guy. I can't even really remember his name, and I don't think, I don't know if I really care if he saw this and knew, but anyways, yeah. So whatever. He used
no,
to like run a previous iteration of the Kansas City meetup group, but he was just like
okay.
doing a really bad job, and he was just kind of
Mm,
driving to the ground. But I didn't know this before, but like I just knew it from when he was running it. And
sure.
then he applied to work where I was working. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, he's running like, the meetup groups. I'm like, I figure he's,
Must be
if
doing
you're a
something
community,
right.
whatever, that's doing something. Oh my God. I just
Mm,
remember like, I was
mm,
looking, and this is, it's granted, BDD or business, driven development, whatever. Like, yeah, I tried to work with it, some and it didn't work out that well. I was saying I was trying to implement that with Cucumber in a project. And of course, this was this then test dependencies. It's like, so they would
sure.
never actually go into production. And like, I had to go through like all of these reviews and like is everything to do it. And like, he was just
Mm,
being very, hitting me over the head with like all this process and stuff. And then eventually, like, I finally answered all his questions. And then like he didn't even know how to add like the libraries to like our local repository. So like I actually had to go and do that for him. And then
mm,
I just remember like some months later, actually after I left this organization, I was taught like had lunch with him just because someone else decided to like invite him to this lunch, and he's just like, oh yeah, sorry about that, or like you didn't know. I'm just kind of like, okay, like you
mm,
made this way more
mm,
difficult. And then
mhm.
like he also had quite the reputation. That's just
Right.
kind of like, I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna say too much, but yeah, that is definitely one of the most key examples I can think of a contra worker.
Right. Right. No, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So Fuel says there's a top level manager that if he joins the company, then I'm out. And it is fascinating to me how it's so hard to find good technical staff. I think it's even
Yeah.
harder to find good technical management. And
Oh yeah.
I've seen too many instances where the wrong managerial hire does so much damage to a team. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough. There's no getting around it.
Yeah. No, and I think it's also one of the things where I feel like it's slowly becoming more awareness of it, but like a really good technical person doesn't necessarily like those are really good technical skills or orthogonal from really good like managerial skills. So like,
Yes.
you could be an absolutely fabulous engineer that has no
Mm-mm,
relationship to
mm-mm,
whatsoever whether or not you be a good
mm-mm.
manager. And so like I think should be more of appreciation that one that you be a technical manager, you don't really necessarily have to have good technical skills. Like, you
Right.
should have at least enough to
Right.
where you understand what people are talking about. Like you should be, when I say you shouldn't, if you're a manager of Java, like if any of the managers, like David, Shar, or Chaz, like got Java and JavaScript confused, like obviously that would be an issue
That'd be a
for what
problem.
we're doing.
Right.
Or if
Right.
you're at a Java shop, you got something like that confused. But
Sure.
you don't necessarily need a lot of deep technical skills to where you're like understanding big O algorithm, something like you
Well,
don't
here's how
even
you
have to
need to
be.
tune your memory management on that particular
Yeah,
piece of hardware.
exactly.
Like,
You don't need someone that has that level of knowledge.
right.
It's great if they can have it, but really the
Right.
skills that are needed are completely different.
Yeah.
And there needs to be more appreciation or that within organizations, if you're looking at like an engineer at becoming a manager, like they need to go through training, not just like, oh, you're a manager now and we're going to train you, but like actual, like before that process, like, multi-month, maybe multi-year training to kind of go
Right.
through to understand those skills that you need. Cause
Right.
again, it's different.
Totally
You're
different.
managing
Yep.
people and a bunch of stuff like that. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, so Field goes on to talk about, damages entire companies. I've seen that. And
Yeah.
people can be very smart and very toxic. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. I've experienced that before. And,
Yeah.
yeah, I very much think manager really should just be exclusively a people thing. And, I've
Hmm.
had instances where they try to be both, and it means they're going to be bad at one of them or both of them, frankly. If you're trying to
Yeah.
split like that, my experience does not work particularly well, but, to each their
Yeah.
own. But
Yeah.
so,
No.
so
Yeah.
I did make an allusion when I was more than that, I guess, when I tweeted about our show here today to Taylor Swift. So I do have to ask, are you dressing for revenge?
I am not. I don't keep up with enough like more recent, like my music taste kind of stopped, I guess, in like the 90s to early 2000s. Like
Right.
sometimes I think
Right.
of like music that came out like shortly after I graduated from like high school or was in
Hmm.
college is like newer music, even though like we're talking like 2004 to 2009 to 2010,
Hmm.
like so by now that's over a decade on. I'm like, oh my God, this music's
I
actually
know.
like
I know.
almost classics now.
I know. I know. Well, sometime this summer, Everett was asking me something about the music that I listened to when I was his age
Mhm.
or when I was growing up. And so I'm like, well, I don't even remember. And so I had to like Google what
Yeah,
songs were popular,
yeah,
in these years. And then I started playing it for him. And I'm like, man, there was actually some pretty decent music. And you go on that little memory trip of, oh yeah. And then at one point, I don't know how it came up, like school dances and things like that. And
Mhm.
so I said, well, every school dance, you had to play Fishing in the Dark, and that was one
Yeah.
that was always there. And then here's other songs that was always played. And, it's always fascinating. So as soon as I hear music in stores and go, yes, that was great. Oh yeah, that's right. 1983. Oh yeah, 100% Fuel. I mean,
Yeah,
I was talking to somebody the other day about, getting older sucks except for the alternatives. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I see. I've also reached that point where I'm mostly introduced to new music by my teenager. It's my son who introduces me to music now, and that's fascinating. Because his
Yeah.
tastes have evolved somewhat from what we introduced him to, and
Hmm.
he's gone in a direction I probably never would have gone on my own. Although he has shown me some. I guess I've listened to some interesting things based on his
Yeah,
recommendations, but
yeah.
yeah. good developers promoted to bad managers. I think we have
Yep.
all seen that. And sometimes it's because, and this one right here, I hate it except for the salary and the status. A lot of companies, sadly, they look at it and say, well, in order to pay you more, we have to give you people responsibility. And
Yeah.
boy, does that
Yeah.
bother me when I see that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an issue I've seen at many companies. And like one of the things, like I just have like zero interest in ever becoming a manager, just because this,
Me too.
I know that skill that doesn't match up with anything I really want to do, and like I
1000%.
respect people who are interested in that. But yeah, it's a bad thing that at many organizations, that's like the only career path. It's like, okay, you
Right.
become, you hire a junior developer, mid-level, senior, and maybe like one or two levels beyond that, or like an architect level. But then it's just like, okay, you're 10, 15 years into your career. Now it's like, if you want to do anything else, you have to become a manager. Or if you want
Mhm.
to get any sort of more growth or something, to become a manager. Um, you have a separate development manager career.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
question. Feel like, do you
Hmm.
have separate tracks or not? And that's a
Yeah.
good indicator of whether a company has thought
Yeah.
that
No, that
problem through.
exactly. So I do kind of remember like a previous role, like someone was asking me, it's like, oh, what's your career path? And I'm like, I'm kind of happy where I'm at. Like, I don't
Right.
really want, or at least I don't foresee management or something like that.
No.
It's just, yeah, no interest there. Again, respect for people who want to do it, but that's not me.
Well, I remember an organization I used to work in had this program, I guess, where they would hire n number of people essentially right
Hmm.
out of college and sort of fast track them for managerial roles. And I can't
Hmm.
remember if it was 2 or 3 years or what, but they got a ton of visibility with high level people and lots of plum assignments. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, I'm certainly of the opinion that there are people in their early to mid 20s who absolutely have the maturity and the
Hmm.
empathy and everything that goes along with being a great people manager. But I feel like that's pretty exceptional because I mean, I think
Yeah.
about some of the stuff you have to deal with as a manager where one of your folks comes in and is like, "Hey, I'm going through a divorce or
Yeah.
my kid's in the
Yeah.
hospital or my dad's dying." And
Yeah.
it isn't just oh, I did good status report this week. There's so much more to it than the sort of mechanics of reporting things
Hmm.
up. And I really do struggle to think that it's the vast majority of folks. If you've never experienced that, it's really hard to know how you're going to handle that. I mean, I don't know how I would handle
Yeah.
it. If
Yeah.
one of my colleagues said, "Oh man, my dad's dying of cancer," I'd be like,
Yeah.
shoot, what do I say now?"
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
then
no,
I don't
you're
want to be
you're
a manager.
absolutely right that there is an element that um, you do need to have some amount of life experience that only comes from living life that most
Yeah.
people in the early 20s to mid 20s just aren't going to have yet. That you're not going to
Right.
have been in a long-term serious relationship that has come to an end, whether it's a marriage
Hmm.
that's getting a divorce, or just you've been with someone for many years, you live together,
Right.
and then that comes in. And it's not like that happens on a Thursday, and that person's going to be fine by the following Monday. Like
Right.
that may take a
Right.
while, and there
Right.
could be whole other reasons beyond the or I mean emotional aspects where there's issues between that. Yeah, there's our parents are worse yet, children, having health
Hmm.
issues. Like, yeah, that's, yeah, I will say the only thing I do think with that, and so at one point I used to kind of think that developer advocacy was really only a role that you really needed like someone more senior that has like a lot of experience in
Hmm.
development, that you would only really want that. But I think, it's actually good to have some people maybe fresh out of college in developer advocacy, because they
Sure.
can do things like, because they just don't, they're just learning it now themselves. They can connect more
Right.
with like very new and junior people. Cause like one question I get asked a lot is like, hey, how do you learn Java? And I'm like, I learned it, close to like 15 years ago
I
now,
did
or a
it
little bit
bit by
longer.
bit over 2 decades.
And
So
that, yeah,
try
no,
that.
yeah, yeah, bit by bit over 2 decades. And then not only that, like any kind of book or anything, like also like I went to college for it. So it's like, I'm
Right.
like, oh, hey, go to a 4 year university to like,
Hmm.
that's not
Hmm.
what someone wants to hear. So like, that's where like a more junior person would help. And at least where
Right.
I'm going back to that is like, it can be good to maybe have someone in their early to mid 20s also managing someone in the early to mid
Sure,
20s, just because they're at that
sure,
same level where that also can make a little bit more sense versus someone who is older or much older than us,
right,
like in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. They may have a lot of trouble connecting with those very
yes,
young
right,
employees. So, like, I'm very much with you that you know, you if you want to have someone in that management position, like they need to kind of a very focused, probably on people more in their age group, just
right,
because
right.
otherwise they may have a lot of trouble really connecting with someone older who is going through a very difficult life thing where they'd be like,
Sure,
"Oh, just dump her, man. Just call her with her
right,
phone and just say
right,
it's
exactly,
over." Like, and
right.
then move on. It's like, okay, that doesn't really work if you're married and have kid or
Mhm,
whatever.
mhm. We have to untangle our
Yeah, you have
finances
to
and deal with
untangle that. Yeah,
fundraise our
you can't just
children and
yeah,
who gets the
you can't just
cats.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't
Mhm.
just exactly end it with a text or a phone call anymore at that
Right,
point,
right.
or just
Well,
ghosting them.
yeah, well, I think it's just that appreciation that people are at different life stages
Hmm.
and they have different perspectives based on what stage they're in. I mean, there's no getting around the fact that someone who is in their 60s has seen, experienced things that someone in their 20s
Hmm.
hasn't, and vice versa. And I
Yeah,
think it's just that appreciation for the different points of view, and they all can bring something to the
yeah,
party. And I think that's an important part of it. And yeah, I think it's unfortunate when folks look past that. But
yeah.
yeah, so Fuel says the toxic person had a bunch of trainees, and then yeah, they felt like they kind of owed their career to him. Yeah, that's not great,
Yeah,
man.
that's yeah, creating like a mafia style structure
I have my
of
fiefdom.
yeah, you'll have fiefdom of now I can't remember the exact word, but yeah, where you tribute or whatever to you.
Hmm.
Yeah, no,
Hmm.
that's terrible, and yeah, you never want something like that in a leadership position. Certainly, I never
Right,
think like other than like I would never think if like I helped someone get like a job that they owe me something,
right, right.
in any meaningful way. Certainly you can think about that of like I'm finding myself without a job, like, hey, yeah, but like again, it's not like any sort of like hard earning or something like that, or
Hmm. Hmm.
that is extremely a toxic trait that like you do
Yeah,
not want that person in a
yeah, no,
senior
100%.
position.
Well, to switch gears slightly here, are you reading anything, listening to anything, streaming anything that you love? That's something you want other people to know about?
um So actually, I think actually one recent YouTube, and like this is kind of outside of job and development, but I've been following recently is a YouTuber called like Asianometry,
Okay.
where he does like these like in-depth videos. Maybe let me see if I can find it on YouTube. Just um,
It
but
just
he does
amazes
these really
me how my son is all over YouTube and YouTube Shorts, and he, well, this is his normal routine. While he's brushing his teeth, he's watching something on YouTube, and then he's watching it as he's walking up the stairs, and he sets his phone on the counter and eats breakfast, and it's like, really, you need to walk
yeah.
up the stairs while watching that? Like, oh, okay, okay, like,
Yeah, so
crazy.
I put it into the private chat. You can post it into
Gotcha,
like a more
gotcha.
public area. But it's a really like he does like these really in-depth videos on things like lithography, like something like that, like how, like microchips
Sure.
are made and like it gets like even not just like that, like how did this specific company become so dominant? And it's like, man, like this is like very neat stuff and like it's but he does such a great job with it. Like I wouldn't necessarily think I would be super interested in
Sure.
how did extreme ultraviolet light lithography kind of become the dominant form that's used by like TSMC and all that stuff
Sure.
and all that stuff. And it's like, wow, this is really interesting. It's just kind of funny because like his voice is like very monotone and he uses a
Okay.
lot of dry humor in it as well. Because like when I remember first like watching like his first like the first video of it, like he had like this weird some dry humor, and I'm first like this seems weird out of
All right.
place, but then I've gotten used to it. It's pretty funny, so I
Sure.
actually
Sure.
really
Oh, that's
enjoy
fantastic.
that. Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the things I find so fascinating about the world we inhabit. It's also a little
Hmm.
terrifying. I mean, I remember being in college having this class that was trying to talk about this intersection of sort of technology and the humanities
Hmm.
and sociology. And one of the things that we talked about that I think has just become even more challenging today, and this conversation I've had with my son quite a bit, is that
Mhm.
you have to be your own editor today. You
Yeah.
have to look at every source of information you're getting and be critical about it. Is this a
Mhm.
trusted source or not? Does this source have a point of view? And of course, it's become so easy to find whatever things you want to see and
Yeah.
only surround yourself with the topics or the point of view that you want.
Yeah.
We don't often get challenged to look outside that bubble. But I also think it's pretty amazing that somebody puts this much time and effort into creating these really interesting, intricate
Yeah.
things. And, like how to build a winning Pinewood Derby car. There's a video that my son and I used,
Yeah.
and, 2 years in a row, he was undefeated.
Yeah. Oh, wow,
So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it's
I
good
remember
stuff.
doing that a little bit as a kid, and that was a fun.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, but you're definitely right that I think, unfortunately, one major issue is that there's a lot of just grifting, like on all
Yeah.
sides of the political spectrum. On one
Hmm.
side more than the other, but both sides have an
Hmm.
issue where there's just people who definitely want to produce and publish content, and they benefit from the current tension.
Right.
And I've definitely become more aware. So I'm more left in my stance, just
Yeah.
to put our cards on the table. And I was thinking like, oh, this is just something on the right, but it's like I've kind of see like also there's definitely just a bunch of like I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, you definitely have to be aware of that. And like sometimes I see some stuff, I'm like, okay, I probably agree with this message, but I also feel like sometimes it's like it's gonna be put together in such a way that like it's just gonna feed into my own pre-existing
Right. Right.
priors that this is not gonna necessarily be helpful. And like, yeah, so it's definitely important to, and I spend probably too much time on YouTube, and so you do have to be very good about like, no, I don't care about this because
Right.
like this is
Skip.
just,
Skip.
yeah, this is going to be feeding a really bad thing into the
Hmm. Hmm.
algorithm that I do
Hmm.
not want in there. Yeah, yeah, the great divider for sure.
Yeah, 100%. It is interesting to me when I watch something and I get an ad and I'm like, actually, I do want to watch this. This
Oh yeah,
this is a movie I'd like to watch, or this is fascinating to me.
yeah,
And then the other ones are like, oh my God, stop it, just stop it, please, enough. I don't care, And I, for one, can't wait for us to be out of politics season. At least here in the US, every time we roll into an election, it is just this constant barrage. And I tried to watch a little bit of the Vikings game yesterday, and just too many
yeah.
ads.
Yeah,
I
I
don't,
know
no,
it
thank you.
is miserable that the commercial breaks during football season,
Mm,
when it's an election year are just awful. Yeah,
can't
it's
do it.
just yeah, it is just constant political ads for us here as well. And then
Right,
so like
right.
and then it's even worse just because like it's you know ad for bad mouthing one person, and then immediate next ad is the bad
Yep,
mouthing the other candidate, and it's
yep.
just kind of like, oh my God. And then like sometimes it's just like the jokes like, wow, this person sounds really awful, like what, like they should just be in jail or whatever. It's just kind of
Right,
like,
right,
how can this person be allowed in civilized society from this like
right.
this, just how over the top the negative ads can be, or just how ridiculous they're what they're making their accusations of. And it's just kind of like, yeah, I just cannot wait for
Right.
next Tuesday to come around, just because I just can't take any more ads, and
And
I
then it'll
can't
be
take any
over for a
more.
while.
Yeah, or the text messages and emails now. Like it's just kind of
Oh,
like, oh
no.
my God, make it stop.
Right, right. So yeah,
Yeah,
so fuel YouTube loves ads. Of course they do, because that's how they pay
yeah,
the bills. And
oh yeah,
that maybe YouTube should ban political ads. Yeah, but it's a lot of money, so I don't
yeah.
foresee that happening
So
anytime soon,
actually, for
sadly. But
me, the one of the nice things is like actually I do YouTube Premium, so like I actually don't get any ads on YouTube.
smart,
So it's actually
smart.
because I remember like I got it sometime like a long time ago, and then on that credit card it lapsed, and then I went back to
Uh-oh.
having ads, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a horrible experience. Like, how does anyone actually deal with this? And so I just immediately went back to like the paid version. So like I don't know how
Right,
much it is a
right.
month. I mean, but it's worth it not having to see any ads or
Sure.
very rarely at least.
Sure. Oh,
Yeah,
that's interesting. So Fuel talks
yeah,
about, that they don't have ads for certain products like
yeah,
tobacco, as part of their whole, they
yeah.
try not to be too evil, at least.
Yeah, yeah, to try not be too evil. Exactly. Not
Right.
not evil, just too evil.
Less
Yeah.
evil. Well, see, I think there's a lot of things today that have this
Yeah.
friction built in as a way of encouraging you to upgrade. I know
Hmm.
I can't remember which of the streaming services we had that had both a free and an an
Yeah.
ad supported free version and then an upcharge. And I think within about a week of having the free version, I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah. The
immediately upgraded because I
other
got so tired of the ads.
Yeah, the other one I can think of is Pandora. So like
Oh, sure.
I've been listening to Pandora since it was pretty much first released like way back in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, or yeah, early 2000. Anyways, and then they wanted to pay version. I'm like, okay, I use it a lot. I'll pay for it. And again, a case where the credit card expired and then it went back to the
Right.
free version, and
You're like,
immediately
oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
oh my god, like this is
Mhm,
so terrible. I had to listen to like
mhm.
3 minutes of ads between like every other song. I'm like, no, no,
Right.
awful.
Right.
Like I look
The
at a
the
lot of
Onion's
Onion.
probably your best bet in many cases, and that's where I get my political information. The
Yeah.
satirists, the comedians are probably doing the best job of covering this than anybody. John Oliver,
Unfortunately,
Jon Stewart, etc.
unfortunately, things have become more ridiculous in real life than even some of the stuff on the Onion would have,
Right?
especially back from like 10, 20 years ago. Now it's
Yes.
like
Yes.
yeah.
I still think one of my all-time favorite Onion bits was the one about the razors,
Oh
5
yeah.
razors. Yeah, that I can't say some of that on the air. Well, I guess I can. It does have the explicit tag, but we'll let you go find that on your own. So,
Yeah.
I know about Tom Brady from Onion. Well, that's fine. I mean, that's probably about all you need to know right now. The way his
Yeah.
season is going, that's probably sufficient. So, and I guess his divorce is already finalized. So there you go. He's on the market. So
There you
good
go.
times. Good times. Oh my gosh. I do want to ask before we break, have you seen Ted Lasso? This came up actually over the weekend. I had some friends over,
No,
and you
no,
have not
that
seen Ted
is,
Lasso.
I've
Oh,
heard
Billy,
great things about
Billy,
it. And I mean, Jason Sudeikis is actually from the Kansas City area, so even more
right?
reason. No, actually, Apple TV is probably like, yeah, it's unfortunate how like we unfortunately didn't realize how great about 10 years ago we were living right in the golden era of streaming where all you needed was Netflix. And now we're
Right.
back to almost like cable where you need a
I
bunch of
know.
these different streaming
I
services to
know.
get all this stuff. But Apple TV is probably one of the ones I definitely want to check out because yeah, Ted
Yes.
Lasso looks
Well
really
worth it.
great, and then there's also For All Mankind, which looks really
That's quite good.
great. Which unfortunately I kind of spoiled for myself just because like stuff pops up in my YouTube timeline, and it's
Right.
just kind of like
Right.
I think so. That's one of the funny things is like so sometimes we're watching like with my wife and I like House of the Dragon or something. It's like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to watch it within like a day or two of it coming
I
out
know.
because like
I
I
know.
want to go for spoilers. It just comes up on my YouTube timeline. It's
I
like,
know.
oh my god, this person killed this person. And I'm like, I'm not even looking for it. Like I'm not like trying to find it, and it gets
And there it is.
spoiled for me. And then it gets
Wait,
like
there
she
was
would get
another
mad at
red
me.
wedding? Like, oh no, oh god, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
no, we all pine for the internet of yesteryear's fuel, and we didn't know how
Yeah,
good we had it. That's absolutely true. No, I feel the same way about sports too. My son and I are Man City fans, and every so often the game will be at a time where we can't watch it live, and I hate if we can't watch it almost immediately because if
oh
I'm not
yeah.
careful, I look at my watch, I go, oh, oh shoot,
Yeah, I mean, it's actually been bad. Like one of the things I hate about streaming games is like often like 2 to 3 or 4 minutes behind sometimes,
hmm
and so like you can't then be on social media because if you are, they'd be like,
hmm
"Oh my God, player X just made this great play," and then it's like, "Okay, well I know what's going to happen now." And
no,
then yeah, especially it's bad when it's like something bad happening for your team. It's like the
right,
opposing team.
right,
It's like, it's just like, God damn
hmm
it. So.
Well, I know you and I could keep chatting. I mean, we haven't even talked about
Mhm.
coffee, which
Yeah,
surprises
exactly.
me. I had my normal double espresso with my
Yeah.
breakfast. I'm sure you've had at least a little bit of caffeine
Oh,
today,
definitely.
but I know
Yeah.
we'll both be in San Francisco here in a little over a month, so
We
we'll
will
definitely get
be.
some coffee at Spring One, my friend. We'll make
Absolutely.
that
Looking
happen.
forward to it. So
Yeah, I'm very excited to get to hang out with you again in person. It's been too long to say the least. Yeah, that's
it has
that's
been for
that's
sure.
been this weird sort of like on again, off again with our travel, and so I'm usually got in this nice rhythm where I knew I was going to run into my friends, weekly
Hmm.
or so, and then it's Fuel wants to know if Tim Tebow still think no, no.
No,
Well, I think
no, not
is
for
he
about a
still playing
decade
for the
now.
Mets? I
For the
mean, is he
Met,
still in their
oh man,
farm system?
oh, that's right. They
He was
bring him.
playing
I don't
baseball.
think he did
Did he finally
anything. Like I
wash
think he
out?
was like on the farm team or something. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't get that
I mean,
guy.
I
Yeah,
know we got a couple call ups to like spring training just because he's, a
yeah,
draw, but
yeah.
I don't think he ever stuck. But
No,
mm,
no.
anyway. Oh,
So
well,
yeah,
speaking
no,
of
looking forward to
conferences,
spring
next
one.
time,
Yeah.
yeah, it's spring one. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you. The next time I'm on here in a couple of weeks,
Matthias,
I'll have
yeah.
Matthias. So we'll talk about J Focus, and I know he's got another event that I'm sworn not to talk about yet, but we'll be talking about soon.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sure
I'll
he
have
and
to
I'll be
watch as
chatting
well then.
about that. Oh yeah, yeah, it should be fun. Should be fun.
Nice.
So wait, Fuel had one more comment. Oh yeah, Mokhtar. Oh, I know Mokhtar. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Yep.
his Twitter handle. Yeah.
Gotcha. His Twitter handle. Took me a second there to translate. I'm a little slow.
Yeah.
I've only had one double espresso, so
Exactly.
such is life. So oh, you should bring up embarrassing stories, Fuel. That's half the
Ooh.
fun. So bring the
Now,
heat
now
in
I'll
a couple
definitely have
weeks,
to watch that episode
right?
to see
Right?
Matthias
Should be
squirm.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I may have to monitor or moderate the comments more than I normally do.
Yeah.
But
RDD.
rage driven development. That's one I've heard resume driven development. But I guess I've got an opening question for him then is to talk about
Nice.
rage driven development. So there we go.
Nice.
There we go.
All
All
right.
right. Well, thank you again, my friend.
Thank
We'll put our
you.
bumper out of here and we'll call it a day.
All
So
right. Thanks for having me.
my pleasure.